I believe it was Jesus who said, "I think Halo is a pretty cool guy. Kills aliens and doesn't afraid of anything." While Halo was a pretty cool guy, he was only that way due to the hard work by the people working at Bungie, who made the games we know and love today. The same games that defined a genre and have cemented themselves as a staple franchise in the history of games. While the gameplay has been praised to death for years, I want to instead focus on the story of these two games for this video. There's two scenes from the original trilogy that I want to talk about today that I believe perfectly illustrate what worked about the Halo games. Each scene is going to represent a half. One for humanity, the other the Covenant. Two stories intertwined, but also very independent in their own themes and storytelling. So I'd first like to talk about this cutscene here, the one where Master Chief, in his own words, gives the Covenant back their bomb. This scene perfectly demonstrates the charm of the human side of Halo. The human side of Halo, comparatively, is much more of an action movie. For example, these scenes are littered with one-liners.
What if you miss?
I won't.
When it comes to later games like Halo 4, it was 343 that said they wanted to go a little deeper into the humanity of Master Chief. If that's your cup of tea, go for it. But I don't think that's what works about that character. Master Chief is a self-insert character whose whole purpose was to make the player feel like a badass.
Possibly make any more noise? I guess so.
It's exactly dialogue like that which charmed players back in the day playing it for the first time. You got to put the disc in, throw on some headphones, and become a cool super soldier who spends all day kicking the asses of aliens, and people throughout the game praised you for it. Marines would cheer when you arrived, they followed your lead at all times because you were in charge. You were the Master Chief.
What about that Scarab?
We've all run the simulations. They're tough, but they ain't invincible. Stay with the Master Chief. He'll know what to do.
Yes, sir, Sergeant.
Even Commander Hood didn't hesitate to say, go right ahead, because he and everyone else have complete confidence in him. It's like in Doom when those characters all jump out of the way like you're parting the Red Sea. It's about giving the player a moment where they literally feel like the most important person in the world, or in this case, all of space, pretty much. You might say it's cheesy, which it kind of is, but it's that type of cheesy where you can't help but grin a little, or even exhale through your nose at least. Master Chief at his best is a stoic warrior of humanity who lives to serve the people. His backstory is a bit tragic, and I think John died a long time ago, but now he's simply Master Chief, a soldier. It's what he knows, and admittedly, it is what he's good at. It was these aesthetics of a humble, grounded humanity fighting against a daunting alien threat that served to improve the morale of players. Master Chief is technically a little more than a human, to be fair, but he is a guy at the end of the day, and so to have one man do something as breathtaking as this, it's a legendary moment in the making, something that you know humanity will likely be talking about for years to come, something that will likely also inspire people to keep fighting for their home. Duh, they have a bunch of planets. What's crazy about it, and this just applies to Halo in general, is that the aesthetics at play here all work in harmony. The UNSC usually is very gritty and grounded in military-themed technology. Big, hefty trucks with machine guns on the back or metal bars for the boys to hold on to, tires covered in mud and blood from running over aliens. The armor looks scratched and dirty, and the guns were simply guns, and bullets, as it turns out, can be just as effective as fancy plasma alien tech. The technology felt like something tangible in our real world. And yet, this looked totally natural next to a big, spiky purple alien bomb. I'm not even really sure of why. It just did. Maybe purple and green is just a successful color combo. I don't know. It's crazy because in some ways, Halo feels more like a fantasy instead of sci-fi. While the scene obviously takes place in space, it's accompanied by beautiful and powerful orchestral music in the background with a choir that sounds something like you'd expect from entering a grand chapel in a world like Elden Ring maybe. It takes these tones of religion and this holiness and comfortably applies that to a world of sci-fi, which would obviously be based around science, loosely. My point being that a Marine with a sniper rifle somehow worked perfectly alongside a Royal Guard with a spear. Now, I'd like to move on to the Covenant side of things.
You are the Arbiter, the will of the Prophets. But these are my elites, Their lives matter to me, yours does not.
That makes two of us.
These are species that have come together that can comfortably travel the stars and yet firmly believe in a greater purpose, a journey or a destination that was meant for them. It's just so fascinating to watch, and it works so well to create a unique aesthetic that makes Halo stand out. I'd like to discuss the other scene for this video, which is near the end of Halo 3, where the Arbiter finally kills the Prophet of Truth. This scene stands out especially when we compare it to the human side of things. While much of Master Chief's story is an action movie, the Arbiter's feels tonally different, more like a classical play in a weird way. This scene where the Arbiter finally has his revenge on a prophet that has misled his people for years and abused their faith feels like the conclusion to a Shakespearean play you'd watch up on stage. The dramatic conclusion, the final act.
I am truth! The voice of the Covenant! So, you must be silenced.
The dialogue feels like someone delivering their big final monologue front and center on the stage, perfectly accompanied by this strange and haunting music, building the moment higher and higher. Finally, with the perfect one-liner befitting Halo, but still feeling natural for this scene, the moment comes to an end. This here would be the moment where the audience would gasp, the music would play its last note, and the curtains would be drawn. I just want to listen to this part right here again, because this section of the music stands out so much to me. It feels so classic, like something that could feasibly work in Macbeth, like when Macduff kills the man himself at the end. Spoilers for Macbeth, by the way. It feels like a timeless story that could honestly be set anywhere, but it just so happens to be set in space. And this scene perfectly wraps up the story of the Arbiter, which I think is very different than Master Chief's, and we see that in the parallels early on. Master Chief is praised for his efforts while the Arbiter is shamed. The Arbiter then sets off on a journey where he believes he needs to find redemption, and this plays alongside the politics we see at work in the Covenant, giving us that extra mystery and intrigue.
Turn, heretic.
Arbiter, I would rather die by your hand than let the prophets lead me to slaughter.
Who has taught you these lies?
In the end, he needs to face his own beliefs and finally confront the truth, literally the Prophet of Truth, but also the realization that the goal his people worked so hard for was all just a lie and a giant misunderstanding. What they believe is a great journey destined to happen is simply the basic protocol of a race of machines simply doing their job. Halo can comfortably be multiple things simultaneously and not feel awkward or bloated. Personally, I don't know if Halo will ever feel this good again, this coming from someone who isn't really a fan of the 3-for-3 games. Halos 1, 2, and 3 still all work perfectly as a trilogy that tells an epic and gripping story about one of the largest wars in history that would dictate the fate of all of humanity. It does all of this while seamlessly blending together all these different aesthetics from all of sci-fi and creating a wonderful and original experience for players. That's what Halo did well. That's why Halo worked.